Didn't pick it up. Hold on, I'll open mine.
It's all right. Crazy. There you go. The little bottle pop top.
Yep. We're back again. Where did November go, dude? November. It's like Thanksgiving next week.
Well, I know for me and probably our guests too, November and most of October went to band. A lot of band.
This is true. Although your season was over in October, you're probably just like decompressed for 2 weeks.
Yeah, we can talk about that later. But it's been nice to have a little bit of a break. We're still grinding though.
Yeah. All right. Let's not beat around the bush here. Welcome everyone to the Aged Out podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Fantini, and with me as always is
Evan Worrell.
And before we get into today's amazing guest, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel if you're watching there. And even if you're not and you're on podcast services, go over to YouTube and hit subscribe because we have a bunch of other content we put out there, clips of the podcast, reaction videos, blah, blah, blah. Check out social media, Facebook, Instagram. Never miss an update on stuff. Check out LoneStarPercussion.com. Use the discount code AgedOut. Save yourself $10 on any order of $50 or more. If you want to support us directly financially, head over to patreon.com/AgedOutPodcast. We have even a $1 tier. And if you can't, just listening supports us enough. So we appreciate whatever you can do. And I think I hit it all. I think I did it all.
Nailed it.
Yep. Evan, take it away. Let's run with this thing.
So joining us today is a fellow Kentucky native, but he's transplanted across the country a little bit from a very far part of the state from me, at least. But joining us is Mr. Joe Hobbs out of Texas. What's up, man?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of just worked out the right timing. I'm sure you guys wrapped up pretty recently with your marching season and your program, which we'll get into shortly as well. But yeah, man, from Murray, Kentucky, right?
Dude, small town, yeah. I was excited when you guys told me you guys were from Kentucky as well, because I've talked about Murray before, and no one has any idea where the hell that is. But it's in Kentucky, small town, far west near Paducah, but grew up there. My mom taught at Murray State, and that's kind of why I ended up going to Murray State. I graduated there from 2002, and then marching drum corps at Southwind for 3 years. Had some really good teachers there. Cliff Walker, Jeff Osdemore was my first snare tech, actually. Yeah, crazy with him. Always was in mind. He rode the member bus, Jeff did. So me and Mike, yeah, I don't know how they talked him into it, but he would sit in the front seat. And then Mike Hodges, awesome tenor player, also marched Southwind 01, and we sat next to each other, and we would go up to the front of the bus every night and say, Jeff, show us a new grid, show us something we can't play, and he would wake up, show us something, and then me and Mike would spend the whole night trying to figure it out, and
dude, that is killer. I couldn't imagine, obviously, for many legal reasons, why staff members probably don't ride the bus with the members anymore. But yeah, just from a sanity standpoint, that's pretty hilarious.
I don't know how he did it, man. He was on pretty much the whole summer. But yeah, marched Southwind 3 years, had a great experience there. Then marched Cavaliers for 3 years and have taught drum corps ever since. It's kind of crazy. This is year 20, I guess, marching and teaching drum corps. So I feel like an old man.
So if you marched for 6 years, were you 16 when you started at Southwind?
I was 16. Yeah.
Okay. Man, I always like am amazed by the kids that start that young, because I didn't start till I was 19. And I just can't imagine like how hard it was for me at 19. I was like, I could not have done this at 16. So I always give kudos to anyone that started that early.
I just don't think I knew any better. You know what I mean? I think I was young and came from a really small high school. Our typical size drum line was 2 snares, 1 quad, and like 3 bass drums. So I just knew I wanted to keep drumming and keep growing. And with Southwind being in Lexington, Kentucky at the time, it was 4 hours up the road, and I just knew what to do. I started auditioning when I was 14, actually, at Pioneer.
Nice.
Had a ton of dudes. It's kind of a weird connection. James Powell, who teaches in the Indiana area, was the caption and an arranger at Pioneer in the mid-'90s, and he went and taught at Murray State. So there were a ton of guys in that area that had marched Pioneer in the late 90s. So it's kind of like what you did if you wanted to march drum corps, you went to Pioneer. So I went there, got cut at 14, then got cut again at 15, and then finally went somewhere else in 16 and made the end snare spot at Southwind in 2001. So
persistence, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it was very eye opening. At 14, it was like I had no idea what I was doing. I remember getting a flam exercise and seeing inverts written out and thinking it was a typo. Like why on earth would anyone write the most awkward sticking ever? And then I got to the camp and realized it wasn't a typo, and I'm just terrible. But man, it was huge growth, and like I said, have stayed in the activity since. I did not teach in 2013, and then obviously the COVID year. But yeah, just love the activity, love doing it, love being around it, and hopefully we'll be around it for many years to come.
So when you were at Cavaliers, your first year, 04, Markworth was there, right?
Yeah.
And then your second year, a good friend of ours from Morehead State, another MSU, not the Murray State that Joe went to, was there, Jonathan Sharp. We called him Sharpie. And actually that 05, wow, and I remember it so vividly watching the innovative videos with the like twangy bass riff that comes on. But at the end of one of those videos, I don't know if it's the drum feature or whatever, you guys do this like visual. It's like a wave down the snare line where everybody like raises like the right arm, and then out of just cold attack space, there's just like this shot, and I swear it's one of the crispiest shots I've ever heard in a video in my life.
I will defend. I know exactly what you're talking about, and I defend it's one of the best pink shots recorded of all time. It's great, and I don't know what. There's something about the audio too. It's kind of odd, but that was a good year, man. That was a weird year. We had 2 vets in that snare line. One was from Japan. Kiyotaka Sakine, whose dad actually runs Aimachi.
Oh, wow.
Sick.
So we split center. He was an awesome player. And then there was really 6 new guys after that. Qualine was a little bit old. It was a real young group. And obviously Brett's last year with the group as well. So
worked out pretty well. Weren't you guys like second in percussion that year, tied or something with like Phantom or something?
We did. We tied finals night. It's nerdy that I know all this or remember all this. We won drums in San Antonio. And then cadets got real good the back half of the season and just destroyed everyone for the rest of the year. So
as they did frequently in the early 2000s.
Absolutely, yeah.
That 05 year is just a phenomenal year for percussion ensembles too. Cadets, guys, Phantom was on the come up. That is Mike McIntosh Connexus line, or not Connexus. Connexus was the show, I think. Bluecoats lines were great. There's some other good groups. But 05 was a great memory. That was the first time that I went to a drum corps regional. I went to the Indy regional before. Of course, finals weren't in Indy that year. I think they were in Fox, maybe. Yeah. So I remember going to that Indy regional and watching cadets warm up, and I was just like, "Oh, it's so loud."
They were so good, man. Every year, I remember as a member. I remember having a picture of them on my wall, like when I was marching Cavs, like as the goal. They were setting the standard, I think, in clarity, that 01, 02, 03. And if you wanted to win drums, you kind of had to go through cadets back then.
That was kind of Mike and myself's like dream corps at the time too, because our drum family tree kind of goes back through that Eric Ward when he was at cadets, and then when he was at Morehead State, and both the guys that taught Mike and myself in high school went to Morehead State with Eric. So we were just kind of like, that's the goal. That's what it is. But
yep.
Yeah, they were just so consistent every year. It was mind blowing. So many great teachers came out of those groups too. Nothing but respect for those lines.
Yeah. Despite like cadets winning a lot in that like 5-6 year period, it's just like so many other good drum lines. Like I consider that early 2000s era, like the pinnacle of what I would call classic drum corps. Whereas like now we're in like the modern era of the iteration of drum corps that exists now, and kind of like that like late 2000s 10 11 12 is like a transition period, but that it's like the pinnacle of just that run and gun style. Like it's just amazing to watch even now.
Classic to us. I bet some 70s 80s 90s cats would fight you on that one.
That's vintage. That's the vintage
there you go.
That's the vintage drum corps. Also amazing in its own right for what they did.
So you mentioned it briefly there too. From 05 to 06, Brett Kuhn left, and then Jim Casella came back from his brief hiatus of drum corps. And was that? It doesn't seem overly drastic, but was it somewhat of a change? I know you guys obviously went from the flat surface to the tilt. Maybe a little bit more freedom in the approach, I would say, from what the 04-05 technique was just maybe a little bit more natural arm motion. But how was that, like, when you guys found out, like, what, Brett's not coming back? Are we going to go back? Was there anything through your head that was apprehensive about returning?
Not for me. I could say this, that drum corps, and I think it's true to this day, is a fraternal organization, and it's a great organization. And it didn't matter who was teaching drums. I was going to be there. The drum corps just meant a lot to me. But I do remember Jeff Fiedler. I remember him calling me probably in middle of August, late August, and just said, "Hey, I want you to know first, Brett's not coming back." And he was like, "Who should we hire?" And he probably already had everything lined up at that point. But he asked me. My immediate response was, "Get Jim Casella." And he's like, "Oh, that's interesting." Again, I think it's all smoke and mirrors. I think he knew what he was going to do. But they hired Jim. I just knew Jim did not teach in 05 at Vanguard. 04 was his last year. And I just, growing up when I grew up, man, those late 90s Vanguard lines, it was just something different. And it was fresh. And the interplay between the battery stuff and the front stuff, all those, like, percussion break, I think in 2000, it was like marching snare roll into concert snare roll into bass drum run into Xylo Gliss, and just all the dialogue. It was just mind-blowing, and what he was doing at the time. And I still don't think there are writers that I love that are writing today, but Jim just always has held a special place in my heart in terms of how he writes and what he does. So when the opportunity, if someone asked me who should we hire at the Cavaliers, my immediate thought was, if Jim Casella will do it, that's the first call. So
I agree wholeheartedly on the Jim Casella fandom. That like on the waterfront stuff that he wrote, and then that video on YouTube where he's like breaking down all the stuff from the scoring and like why he did, and like pattern A versus pattern B and how it overlaps and how it relates to like it's so phenomenal. It's such a great combination of tasty musicality and substance, the way it's paced out. I could not agree more with that.
Yeah, I think it's been really cool. Later on in life, we've actually become pretty close friends. We go hiking together. We have been in a couple years, but I've gotten to know the guy, most humble person on the planet, awesome guy. Yeah. So anyway, going back to what we were talking about, yeah, they hired him in 06. The technique change was pretty drastic, but for me, coming from the Southwind technique and the way we played, which was a little more old school, like a lot of back finger to do everything. If I were to play like Irish, but I would do almost everything with my back fingers. More Cavaliers, it was a little more wrist first and support with finger. And the Vanguard staff that came with them, which had some incredible teachers, one that comes with Dustin Schletzer, who I think is an unsung teacher. I don't know if his name gets thrown around as much as it should. Was pretty life-changing for me having him in there. But just a little, it was more about what your arm does in the space, I would say the change was. It wasn't necessarily how I grip the stick, but it was more like what the stick does between the notes was the biggest change, I think. And adding that arm and adding that flow. But that was the biggest change. And some of the members were excited about it, and some of them honestly weren't. I think 06 was a real difficult season for some of that staff, just because they were going with guys that didn't go to Cavaliers to play that way. And there was a little bit of a struggle back and forth. But obviously the show was great. We had a great vehicle, and it was a pretty awesome year.
Yeah, worked out pretty well for the whole ensemble for sure. Took away that gold medal. The machine.
Yeah, it was awesome, and we knew pretty early. I remember Jim sending me, or sending the members an email of the draft of the drum solo with all the typewriter stuff. And it used to be, I don't know if you remember the part, it was all 6 tuplets. It used to be all singles, like just burning singles for like 30 seconds straight. Couldn't play to save my life, but I remember emailing like Jim immediately being like, and I didn't know Jim really at all. He was my teacher at that point. I remember, this is the coolest effing stuff I've ever heard. Send, I was just so stoked. And I was like, this is so different for us. And we knew the show was good early on. We just had to kind of achieve it. And if we achieved it, we thought we'd be, in the conversation, for a championship that year.
It was another good year for just drum corps shows.
Yep.
That show, the Phantom Regiment Faust show. The Bluecoats did. It was either Connexus or Caravan. I don't remember which years they did which. 05 or 06, but just another great year for shows. The Blue Devils, the Godfather show.
And that Phantom drum line, I remember Lisle, Illinois, I'll never forget this, playing a warm-up and then walking to go do the show and walking by Phantom in 06 and just hearing that buzz intro, I was like, Oz, ooze, Oz, ooze, Oz, ooze. like with how they started the show, and I walked by and I was like, oh, God bless, that's ridiculous. Like being almost like so they were so good so early. That's like that was kind of Paul's first like staple, like signature line when it came out. He was like, that's ridiculously good. And they just didn't slow down all summer, man. They were tough. No one beat him, I think, towards the end. So
yeah, that's probably one of my favorite drum lines all time. Just maybe I won't say the best, but just one of my favorite.
So clean. It's unbelievably clean. And the tuning was a little higher for him, I thought, that year.
Yes.
And the snares, and it cut. And when it really hit, it was just, it was undeniably good.
It was not, it was very transparent. They were not hiding, that's for sure.
Not at all. And yeah, just unbelievable. Watching videos now, I still watch videos of that. And it's just like, my goodness, nobody was touching that year.
So get done, age out. Were you immediately like, I want to go teach, or did you just kind of fall into it and then it worked out that way?
I knew I wanted to teach. I ended up doing actually some Cavaliers camps that year. And I knew I wasn't going to teach in the summer. They just needed some extra help. That was actually the first time they did satellite camps. It used to be if you wanted to try out the Cavaliers, you had to go to Chicago. And you'd have like 120 snare drummers all in one room. They started the satellite thing that year. So I think I did Houston and maybe Atlanta that year. But I knew I was going to teach in the summer, but a good friend of mine, Eric Willie, who's a fantastic teacher at a University of North Carolina, Greensboro, was going to Southwind. He'd been there a couple years. He wrote the front ensemble stuff. And then they hired Shane Gwaltney, who obviously teaches at Mystique and has taught at Mystique for years and years and years, was going to do the battery book and be the battery caption head. And Eric called me and said, do you want to do it? I think I called Eric Johnson at IP and said, hey, should I do this thing? And he's like, 100%. Dude, Eric Johnson's still the guy I call, if a life-changing thing comes up, I just call him and say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And I just always trust his input and his guidance. And he said, of course, and did the thing. And so started teaching right away in 2007.
Nice. So, good friend of ours, well, especially mine, March 2007, 2008 Cavaliers, Ted Leith.
Yep.
Yeah.
Harrison County. What's up, Ted?
That's Kentucky. A lot of good Kentucky representation in this podcast.
Yeah, man, we're holding it down, So then you went through a pretty extensive, like, many good cores, caption head at Spirit for a little bit, right? Taught at MCM. Obviously, you had that Shane Gwaltney. Phantom, Cavaliers. What was the kind of the segues to each of those? How did the Spirit to MCM, Phantom, Cavaliers, back to Cavaliers happen?
Yeah, it's funny, actually. So after 2007, we did Southwind, and it folded. We taught that 1 year, they immediately folded. And that was some good people involved, but man, that was a rough summer in terms of just getting down the road. I remember we had this old RV for the staff that had no AC.
Ooh.
And we would just sweat, and it was like me and Shane and Eric Willie and Steve Vento does a lot of brass arranging now. Just sweating and just like not sleeping well. I think I was the visual tech that summer too. So like I didn't take any blocks off. Like I just went, and I didn't know any better. That's what I did. And then so Southwind folded, so we knew we had nothing. We're not going back. And then I actually took a job at Cavaliers. Believe it or not, in 2008, Dustin Schletzer called me and said, hey, I'm going to teach probably 1 or 2 more years. I want you to come teach with me. You'll take over the snare line in a couple years. And I said, yeah, I'm in. Sold. And then about a week later, Shane Gwaltney calls and said, hey, I got Clint Gillespie's leaving Spirit, and I got called to take the Spirit job. Are you coming? I was like, man, I just took this job at Cavaliers. And he's like, well, what if we make you the caption head? And I'm 22 at this point.
Wow.
So I was like, well, that's intriguing, And I remember debating. I was student teaching at the time. And I was debating with a supervising teacher, like, man, what do I do? Do I take this Cavalier job? Or I want to teach the top echelon student? Or do I take this other job, where I'm running things and I have to learn that skill set? And he didn't really give me an answer, but I ended up taking, obviously, the Spirit job. And I just felt as though that would take me more out of my comfort zone. I could have gone to Cavaliers and been the second or third snare tech and taught a system that I was comfortable with. Or I can kind of have to try and develop my own thing at Spirit. And I just felt like in the long run, I would become a better teacher faster by doing the Spirit thing. And called Jim Ancona, and it was the shortest conversation I've ever had. It was real awkward. I remember calling Dustin afterwards. I was like, Jim, I'm going to take the Spirit thing. He's like, cool, great, thanks. And then hung up. And I was like, oh, God, what did I do? Is Jim furious? But they took the Spirit gig. And then we were there 3 years. And we did really well. That '08 Spirit line, I'll defend to my dying day. Those guys were killer. A lot of good talent. '09, we had some struggles. We went 10 snares and 6 quads, which might have been a mistake.
That's hefty.
Very bold.
It was bold, too bold.
Bold strategy there, Cotton. Let's see how it plays out.
I'll give you a spoiler alert. It didn't really play out for us. And then 10, we had a great season as well. And then Paul Rennick obviously left Phantom after 2010. I think Shane had kind of proven himself in DCI that he could put out good drum lines. Obviously, Mystique was fantastic through all those years. And then we got the call to check out the Phantom thing. And I wasn't the caption there. I think when they hired Shane, it was following Paul. Paul's a do-it-all. Paul's a unicorn. You know, he's going to teach it, and he's going to write it. He's going to do all the stuff, which is just really rare these days. And I think they kind of expected that of Shane. So I was I didn't have a title, but probably battery coordinator. Maybe be the role when I was there. I'd kind of run battery stuff, and Shane would be in the box. And we were there for 2 years. And that was a tough gig, man. That was a tough one. Following Paul, it's, like following Michael Jordan playing shooting guard for the Bulls.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
So we learned a lot, but it was tough. I'm not going to lie. Those were some tough summers. And I was still young. I was still probably 24, 25. And so just trying to figure some stuff out. So did that, and took a summer off in 13. And went back to gym. We actually went to Nepal. Me, Casella, and another friend who teaches drum corps, writes at the Colts now, Mark Hunter, teaches with me at Vandegrift. We went and hiked in Nepal for like 3 weeks. So took 13 off, did that, and then got a call. I remember I got a text from Scott Coder, really well-known program coordinator for Vanguard. I was going to see the movie theater broadcast in 13. He just texted and said, hey, would you be interested in teaching drum corps next summer? And I said, sure, let me know. And then I got a call from Mike McIntosh after that, and I jumped on in 14, and then 15, they made me the caption head, and was there for a couple years. So.
Heck yeah. Yeah. Never a bad thing to get a call from McIntosh, be like, hey, you want to teach together? Just such a smart dude. Another, I would say, great arranger that just uses space and time really, really well.
Yeah, it was his books and Shane's books are really similar in terms of there's a lot of metric modulation, a lot of rhythm changes in the hands. I remember talking to Tim Maynard about that, another outstanding teacher that doesn't get talked about enough. But Tim taught at Mystique for years and years, taught those Bluecoats lines with Mike, and I think we talked about that a lot. Like the connection between those two arrangers are very similar. Like I said, lots of hand speed changes. So it worked out well. Like I said, I enjoyed it. That was 2014 in Cavaliers, and I stayed there through 2018. So